This is a fictional crime story created for entertainment purposes only. It does not promote or glorify criminal behavior.
The first time is supposed to be the hardest. Mine was easy. Too easy. I remember thinking that as I watched my brother's chest rise and fall for the last time. My own flesh and blood. The golden child. The favorite. Yeah, I killed my brother. What? You thought I'd deny it? I'm not here to plead innocence or beg for forgiveness. I'm here to tell you exactly how a regular guy becomes a hitman, and how that hitman's first job becomes his last. Funny thing about family. They're the ones who know exactly how to push your buttons because they installed them. My brother Marcus knew every single one of mine. Growing up, he was everything I wasn't. Athletic, charming, successful. The prince to my pauper. Mom and dad's walking, talking retirement plan. I was the afterthought, the spare part. At least that's what I told myself. Easier to blame him than to admit I was just mediocre. I didn't start out wanting to kill people for money. Hell, I didn't even start out wanting to kill my brother. Life has a funny way of presenting opportunities when you're at your lowest. It was 3 years ago. I'd lost my job again. My wife had left me again. And there I was, drowning my sorrows at this dive bar when this guy in an expensive suit sits next to me. We get to talking. And somehow, I end up telling him about Marcus, about how he stole my inheritance, my parents' love, my chances at success. The man slides me his card, says he solves problems for people, says he can tell I have the right temperament, says he can offer me a job with a future. And just like that, I'm being recruited to become a hitman. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some B-movie plot, but desperation makes you consider options you'd normally scroll past. And hate. Hate makes you rationalize the unthinkable. Training wasn't what you'd expect. No firing ranges or a knife-throwing practice. It was all about blending in, becoming forgettable, learning to watch routines, spot vulnerabilities. The technical stuff came later. The first rule they taught me: never take a job involving someone you know. So naturally, when they finally deemed me ready and asked who I wanted for my first assignment, I said, my brother. They refused, of course, but I convinced them, told them it would prove my loyalty, my commitment, that I could separate emotion from the job. What I didn't tell them was that I'd been planning this long before they found me. That bar meeting? Not as random as I made it sound. The plan was simple. Marcus had this cabin in the mountains. Once a month, he'd go there alone to reconnect with nature, or whatever. No cell service, no witnesses. Just him and his thoughts, and eventually me. I watched him for weeks, learned his routines. When he'd arrive, when he'd sleep, when he'd take his evening walk by the lake. I knew exactly when to strike. The night I did it was perfect. No moon. A storm rolling in. I let myself into his cabin while he was out on his walk. Waited in the dark, heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it when he returned. But he didn't. He came in, shook off the rain, poured himself a whiskey. Didn't even notice me sitting in the corner. I watched him move around the cabin. So confident, so alive. For a moment, I hesitated. Remembered us as kids, before competition and resentment poisoned everything. He finally sensed something. Turned. Saw me. And you know what he did? He smiled. Hey, little brother, he said. I've been waiting for you. That's when I realized he knew. He'd always known. About my hatred, my jealousy, maybe even about my plan. I raised my gun. My hand was steady. I'd practiced this moment 100 times in my head. I forgive you, he said. Just like that. 3 words that should have meant nothing, but somehow meant everything. I pulled the trigger anyway. What they don't tell you about killing someone is how quiet it is afterward. How the silence rushes in to fill the space where a person used to be. I stood there, gun still raised, watching my brother's blood spread across the wooden floor. I was supposed to feel victory, relief, power. Instead, I felt empty, his last words echoing in my head. I forgive you. I left everything as planned, made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Drove back to the city feeling numb, hollow. Mission accomplished, right? My employers were impressed. Said I had a bright future ahead of me. But those 3 words wouldn't leave me alone. I forgive you. Why would he say that? What did he know that I didn't? I broke into his house a week later. Needed to understand. In his office, I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were loan applications, job references, recommendations. Years of them. My brother had been quietly helping me my entire adult life. Every job I thought I got on my own, he'd put in a word. Every loan I somehow qualified for, he'd co-signed. And there was a letter, to me, explaining that our parents' will had been changed to leave everything to me. Marcus had convinced them I needed it more than he did. He'd been protecting me all along, cleaning up my messes from the shadows. The golden child wasn't stealing my birthright. He was securing it, and I killed him for it. 3 days later, I walked into a police station and confessed everything. Turns out my employers weren't as careful as they thought. Or maybe I wasn't. Either way, they found evidence. Lots of it. So here I am, serving life without parole. My employers got caught too eventually. Rolled on each other like the rats they were. You know what's truly ironic? I finally found something I was good at, something I excelled at. And it destroyed me. Destroyed everything. They say the first kill is the hardest. Mine was easy. Too easy. It's living with it that's hard. That's the real sentence. So if you're sitting there, nursing your grievances, plotting your revenge, thinking about crossing that line, remember this. Sometimes your worst enemy is the voice in your head telling you you've been wronged. And sometimes, the person you think is against you is the only one truly on your side. The funny thing about forgiveness, it's offered freely, but only to those who don't deserve it. And by the time you realize its value, it's already too late.